Good evening again. My name is Rick Bowden, and I am president of the Pinckney, Putnam, Hamburg Hell Chamber of Commerce. And like I've said earlier, is that we always do candidate forums before any election. We do them for contested positions, and the contested positions, we're doing them tonight, are going to be on the August 4th ballot. And this will be for the election of anybody who's there. We invite people who represent our area, and sometimes it's just the local people. We've had people from Hamburg and Putnam Township, but then we had our county commissioner that represented us, and now we're going a little broader where we've got candidate for prosecuting attorney for the area. So there are two candidates that are running for prosecuting attorney. One is the incumbent, who is Bill Vailliencourt, and he is being challenged by David Reeder, who could not be with us this evening. So, Bill, you're here by yourself tonight, so you're going to give you a 5 minutes to pretty much tell us about you, tell us about why people should vote for you, and then we'll have some questions.
Thanks, Rick. I'm Prosecutor Bill Vailliencourt. Rick, I want to thank you and the Chamber for the opportunity to speak to you live and virtually tonight. As your prosecutor for the last 8 years, I've kept the focus of the prosecutor's office on protecting public safety, and I will continue that focus for the next 4 years. I have the experience and the independence to do the job effectively. When I talk about experience, that means that I work for you. I don't answer to the judges. I don't work for the defense attorneys. I work to ensure that the voices of victims are heard and that public safety is protected. That oftentimes means saying no. No to someone who wants a special deal, or no to someone who just wants to get a case resolved. Experience counts to be prosecutor. I've been a prosecutor for 27 years, and I not only understand every facet of being a prosecutor, but I've done it. I work hand in hand with law enforcement. They trust and rely on my judgment and experience to ensure that their cases are prosecuted properly. That experience explains why I have such broad support in the law enforcement community, including Sheriff Mike Murphy, retired Sheriff Bob Bazat, and the police chiefs who work in this county every day to protect you. Experience counts because being a prosecutor is not like any other position in the criminal justice system. It's certainly not like being a judge who just watches a finished product being presented in court and looks to the lawyers to identify the issues for them and propose how they should be resolved. Being a prosecutor means being on the front lines with law enforcement to identify and address issues long before they get to court. It means answering the phone at 2 in the morning when police call from a crime scene looking for help. There's only one chance to get it right, and that demands the knowledge and experience to get it right. There's not too many jobs where you're tested in the middle of the night after being awakened from a sound sleep. But being prosecutor is one of those jobs. Experience means working with police as they investigate a case. It means consulting with victims. It means assessing the strengths and weaknesses of a case and identifying all the factual and legal issues that are involved. It's deciding how to present the strongest case in court and how to best achieve justice in the individual case for the victim and the community. I'm the only candidate for prosecutor with the experience and the independence to be prosecutor. And speaking of being the only candidate for prosecutor, I'm the only candidate for prosecutor here tonight. I'm sorry that my opponent chose not to be here tonight because I think the contrast between us would be enlightening. We haven't really heard much from my opponent. We haven't really heard anything about why he thinks he's qualified to do this job or what he would do as prosecutor. I would urge everyone to watch the Republican debate or the League of Women Voters debate that we both participated in. There are links to those debates on my website, vailliencourt.com, and my Facebook page at Livingston Prosecutor. I think you'll find those debates very informative, and you can see who's prepared to serve you as your prosecutor. Being prosecutor is not for beginners, and it's not a retirement job. I'm grateful for endorsements from the Livingston County Farm Bureau and the Right to Life of Michigan PAC. I'm the only candidate for prosecutor to have received those important endorsements. And I appreciate the broad support from the law enforcement community as well. I'm asking for your support on your absentee ballot or at the polls on August 4th in the Republican primary. Thank you.
Bill, one of the things that a lot of people have talked about, and it's been something that's went on through the last 4 years of you having your position, is the handling of the Teresa Brennan case and former judge. And what can you share about how your department handled any of that, how you were involved, or any of the things that you know, or any of the things that should have been done differently, or things that your department did right?
I think we did everything that could have been done and should have been done. We received a letter on the very eve of trial. This had been a case that had been pending for years in the appellate courts and in the trial courts. And it had even been scheduled for trial the previous month before it went. At the last minute, we get a letter that raised some allegations regarding relationships involving the judge and one of the officers. And as soon as we received that letter, we did what we should have done. We contacted the lawyer for the defendant, advised him of everything we knew, that it was well known in the legal community, and even Dave Reeder acknowledged it, that Furlong and Brennan were friends. We disclosed that to him. We also told him the rumors that had been circulating around the legal community, that maybe it was more than that. But to suggest that I knew more than that they were friends is simply false. Everyone knew they were friends. Dave Reeder said he knew they were friends, said it wasn't a problem. There was only one person with the knowledge and the information that could answer the question of whether she could be impartial, and that was the judge. So the parties went right to the source, went right to the judge for her to decide or determine, to tell us whether or not she could be impartial. Like I said, it's important to remember the context. This case had been going on for years. Clearly there was a history involved here by the lawyer that wrote the letter, prior complaints, JTC filings. This wasn't the first judge she had gone after. Even Dave Reeder questioned, he was skeptical of the motives of the letter that was written and questioned the extreme last minute timing. He even apologized to the defendant that it was so late. You know, and as the chief judge, Dave Reeder had the opportunity and the ability to have removed her from the case and taken it himself for any reason or no reason, but he chose not to do that. Instead, this was a last-minute issue that didn't need to be a last-minute issue. It did everyone a disservice. And when later on, a number of years during her divorce, additional facts came out, I immediately acted and did 4 things. I contacted the Judicial Tenure Commission and requested that they investigate Judge Brennan. Dave Reeder didn't do that. I contacted the state police. I requested that they do a criminal investigation involving Brennan and Furlong. I contacted the Attorney General's office and advised them that they would need to review any criminal referrals arising out of this, with which they did. And then I contacted the defense attorney and advised them of everything that we knew and everything that had been uncovered so they could review it independently. It then, unfortunately, took the Judicial Tenure Commission almost a year and a half to do its investigation. But I did everything that could have been done and should have been done. It's unfortunate that resulted in there needing to be a new trial, but that was a decision that I made after all the facts and circumstances were known. So again, we did everything that could have been done and should have been done.
Bill, another question that some people have brought up, and it's a campaign issue, is some people are wondering about your handling of the case where the person threatened to burn down Howell, Michigan, and that your department didn't act.
Well, as we've seen, there's been some false information out there about that. The Howell Police Department is doing additional investigation. I believe they've released a statement about that. Because in cases like this, investigations take a while, and it's not uncommon in these kind of cases. Once they've concluded their investigation, we'll review everything that they've learned and make a determination based on the evidence that they've uncovered. We'll look at what statutes might be involved, and we'll look at the constitutional issues that may be involved. Now, I can't comment specifically on a case because that'd be highly inappropriate to do so while they're doing the investigation. I can talk about the investigation of online crimes generally. A little feedback. Online crimes are not that uncommon. We see it in areas of fraud, identity theft, internet stalking, cases involving kiddie porn and sexual exploitation of children. But there's a lot involved in these cases that requires legally admissible evidence. You can't just rely on something that's in a news report. Some of the things that need to be done in these kind of cases is identifying the specific person at the keyboard, the person that put the information out there. You also need to identify the location where the activity was committed, because that determines where cases can be prosecuted. It also requires information to determine what the intent of the person was when certain things were posted online, and the circumstances. And you do that by looking at other information being posted around the same time. Now, in order to get this kind of information, it requires search warrants to internet providers, content providers, to find out exactly what is posted, when it was posted, where it was posted. And that means, oftentimes we're looking to Facebook or Twitter or other online sources of information to find out, to get information from their records about what was posted and when it was posted. Now, Twitter, Facebook, they're responding to search warrants from every police agency across the country. So it takes time, and they determine when we get that information. There's also the information that's required involving suspect interviews. That's a critical part of any police investigation that needs to be done. But what police cannot do is just rely on a press report that says, well, this is what we saw on Twitter. We need the actual legally admissible evidence in order to do that, and that's what we're waiting for in this case. Once we get it, we'll be able to make the decision as to whether or not a crime was committed and by whom committed the crime. But we can't act without that information.
Thank you. We had one of the county commissioners here talk earlier, and he talked about some of the cuts that may have to take place. And so finances are going to be tough with COVID and with state budgeting, and that'll come down to the county level. What do you see that you've done in your department to streamline things, to be able to make cuts, to be able to make things efficient, but yet not have the funding that might get cut from you? So, how you can handle it?
Well, when it comes time to making financial choices and determining priorities, public safety is the most important function of government, and that demands that public safety receive a priority on funding. At the county level, that means the sheriff's department, the jail, the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office runs very lean. The bulk of our budget, more than 90% of it, are salaries and benefits. 6% of it is facility and technology costs that are internal charges from the county. The discretionary part of the budget that we have control over for supplies, training, expeditions, that runs about 3 to 4% of our budget. So we're a lean operation. We spend less than the county office that provides indigent defense for people that can't afford lawyers. Yet we do a lot more work than they do. For example, every criminal case has to come through our office on a warrant request. Approximately 25 to 30% of those cases, we deny charges. So those cases never even get to see the inside of the courtroom. But yet that involves significant staff effort to review those cases and determine whether or not there is a viable basis for prosecution. So we've maximized our use of technology. I mean, we've been operating throughout the pandemic to make sure that those that get arrested by police, that their charges are reviewed and determinations are made on a timely basis. We're always looking to do things more efficiently, and that means a greater use of technology. And to that extent, we work cooperatively with police agencies, with the courts to ensure that that's done. But we watch every dollar. We don't spend money just to spend it. We make sure that it's something that is critical to performing our essential functions to protect public safety.
Okay, Bill, you are the incumbent. What changes do you think would happen if you aren't returned to that office, and what efficiencies do you think you have to be able to continue if you stay in office versus if we have a changeover in the prosecutor's office?
Well, I can't speculate about what my opponent might or might not do. It would have been nice if he was here to explain that, but he hasn't really said anything about what he would do differently. I mean, I'm proud of what we've done over my 8 years as prosecutor. We've maintained a consistent focus on protecting public safety. That means prioritizing violent offenders. drunk drivers, those who commit domestic violence and sexual assault. Those will always be our priorities. We use specialty courts where appropriate to ensure rehabilitation and accountability, but they're not for everyone. There are some offenders that threaten public safety, and that needs to be recognized in prosecuting those cases. As I've indicated, we've always been a leader in using technology. Our primary challenge in using technology has frankly been in dealing with the courts. We still have to print out pleadings and file it with the courts, with our local courts, even though we can file things online with the State Court of Appeals and the State Supreme Court. Our local courts don't have that capability yet. So I welcome the opportunity to be able to do that. We are working to improve our technology so that, especially in our dealings with police departments, you see more and more digital evidence these days, whether it's body cams, dash cam videos, and that's a challenge for law enforcement in getting us that information, and then for us when we get that out to defense attorneys so they can assess the information as well. And we're continuing to work with county information technology to come up with the best ways of doing that so it's both effective and efficient and not costly, because we all know server space is expensive. So I think we will continue those priorities. I'm proud of what our office has accomplished in the past in continuing our focus on public safety. We've prioritized prosecutions of violent offenders. We've worked with local law enforcement to ensure that they receive the training on the most recent best practices, whether it's in areas of sexual assault, strangulation, and domestic violence. So those will continue to be my priorities over the next 4 years.
You talked about those priorities, but what other improvements, if you are reelected, do you see as the improvements that you can make within your department?
Well, I think if you continue to utilize technology, I mean, clearly the pandemic has had a dramatic impact on how things are done. We see more court hearings where they're not conducted in court, they're conducted remotely. I see that continuing even after we get back to whatever normal ends up being. And I think that's a benefit because for victims, oftentimes one of the most common issues we hear from victims is, well, they've got to work, they've got families. Going to court where sometimes they're sitting around waiting for hours to have their case heard is a tremendous inconvenience to them. And so I think we will continue working to try to ease the burden on victims, but also remember to keep the focus on victims. Because in many cases, victims want to be important. They want to face the person that victimized them and explain to them how the crime has affected them. So we need to, as we make these changes and try to continue to increase the use of technology, we need to remember victims. Remember that sometimes it is a tremendous trauma to them knowing that their face is going to be streaming live online on the internet as they describe some of the most personal traumatic events that they've ever suffered. I mean, that's difficult doing it even in a courtroom with a number of individuals that choose to show up or talking to a jury. But again, knowing that you think about a high school rape victim suddenly knows that everyone in her school was watching her. I mean, the trauma that imposes and the difficulty that creates in prosecuting those kind of cases, that needs to be remembered, and that will continue to be our focus to protect their rights as we move forward and seeing what the new normal is going to be like.
Okay. Bill, can you give us about a 2-minute wrap-up of why you should be the elected candidate?
I think being an effective prosecutor requires knowledge, experience, and independence. I'm the only candidate that has the knowledge and the experience and the independence to be an effective prosecutor. I've prosecuted cases ranging from drunk driving to murder. I've tried criminal cases in front of juries in district court and circuit court. I've argued cases in the Court of Appeals and the Michigan Supreme Court. I know what it means to be a prosecutor and how important it is to be focused on protecting the victim's rights. Being a prosecutor is not something for on-the-job training. I have the experience to do the job, and I can do the job, and I think I've demonstrated that. I also have the independence. Being a prosecutor is the only person in the criminal justice system that truly represents the people. The prosecutor is the one that has the ability to stand up for fair trials, fair sentences, and to ensure that a voice for victims is heard when those cases are being prosecuted. I've demonstrated I have the ability to do that. I'm the only one with the knowledge, experience, and the independence to do that, and I would ask for your support either on your absentee ballot or at the polls on August 4th in the Republican primary. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's our second from last segment of tonight's program. That is Bill Vailliencourt for prosecuting attorney. We've got one more segment, and it's going to be our 8th Congressional District candidates. We've got 3 of the 4 that will be here. So we're going to take just a few minutes here to do a little break and get some things set up, and we will be back with you in just a little bit. But this is the candidate forum put on by the Pinckney-Putnam-Hamburg-Hale Chamber of Commerce. Thank you.